We discuss a lot about Gen Z, about the future generation, the way they are going to, interact with the luxury and fashion brands, and what do they expect from us. So to continue this discussion and go even into more details to better understand, this generation, which doesn't behave like Gen X or boomers, and it's even more important to really understand them because they will represent 45% of the turnover of luxury within 3 years. So I really invite, I'm really pleased to invite on stage two young ladies who are working every single day with this generation. They are from the Ed School, and I invite on stage Dinie VAN DEN HEUVEL, which she's creative director of Infantium Victoria, which is a sustainable fashion brand, and Dinie is also a consultant on that matter. And I invite as well Aude FELLAY, please. Aude, will be easier. Yeah. Fashion researcher, writer, and tutor at the Ed. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. It will be a sort of conversation. They will talk between experts, just to emphasize the key points that they have been, seeing, observing within their days at Ed School. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. We don't have something to sell, so I guess this is going to sound a little different. We both teach at Genève in the fashion design department. I in charge of the theory courses on the MA, and Dinie teaches sustainability or leads sustainability courses. My work focuses mostly on the relationship between fashion, the image, and labor. Maybe we'll get into some of these topics later. But maybe, Dinie, I'll let you say a few additional words on your work, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah. So I've been teaching in fashion for about 15 years now. I've been at the head for 8 or 9 years. And I have moved more and more into sustainable design. I run a children's brand parallel to my teaching work, where we focus on sustainability, and which I kind of like to use as a testing ground. So a lot of the sustainable concepts that I teach and that my students explore, we have also used and explored in my company. So I work closely with the students to explore what sustainability means for them and how they can use it in their creative practice. I think you have heard so much about sustainability, and I think the key always comes back that nobody knows exactly what it is, that there is no set criteria yet. And so also from a design point of view, it very often means that you have to question your ethics and the belief system that you work in, that you operate in, to figure out how you can really move forward or present the vision that you have in parallel with your belief system to create a sustainable product in the end.
Yeah, so let's start. As you said, you've been involved in sustainability for some years now. You've taught in different schools across Europe. And my first question is, how would you describe your current students, or the famed Gen Z's, relation to sustainability?
I think it's a very ambiguous relationship. All the data that you read, sustainability is very, very important for them. At the same time, they are the biggest consumers at Shein, so it's kind of a paradox. But when I look at our students, the students that choose to study design and that want to have a creative future, where they want to develop products, but at the same time be very, very creative in that approach, they have an understanding that sustainability is at the core of their practice. It's not a sauce they apply later. It's not something that runs really parallel. It's somehow the foundation from within, from where they want to create. Of course, not everybody has the same passion and not everybody has the same approach, but I would say majority has a big understanding that it is a necessity to move forward. I also think they envision their future as one where they practice sustainability. I also have the feeling that if I talk to them, they have a very strong commitment to work for brands that have a sustainable agenda, not because they communicate it, but because they practice and live it. Our students do a lot of internships. They have a lot of hands-on information about the brands that they look up to or that they admire. And so they're looking for those and really selecting those that have a sustainable method of working, where, of course, the first thing they encounter is how socially sustainable a company is. This is the first hurdle that they meet. It's the first real confrontation with the topic. If I go and work for you, if I go and do an internship with you, how am I treated? Am I respected for the person that I am? How is the company relating to me and to my work? But very soon they realize that it's not just the social aspect, that all the other aspects come into play as well. So I think the longer they're with us, the more thorough they understand the different aspects of the topic. I don't know if that's something that you also see happening?
Absolutely, and I guess they see through the bullshit. So they are as media savvy as any senior marketing person out there. I guess they need to, experience sustainability to believe in it or to feel that their values can align with a brand. And I guess a lot of us students come back from internships with at times a very good experience, at times a very sort of, sour experience. There's the discourse out there, and then there's the reality. And I guess that lack of transparency makes for a lot of cynicism. So we're lacking in data, in just concrete actions and numbers. So I would say that they're very attuned to the issue, but very wary of the way brands use the term. And these days, most brands use it. And it feels that it's, as you said, very hard to pin down. What does that mean? And we were talking earlier between each other about regulations. And I guess they do feel that, or at least that's something we experience too as tutors, is the lack of, regulation makes for a very opaque and just hard to navigate sort of industry, in sustainable terms at least. You, in your brand, deal, with these issues every day, regulation-wise. Can you say a little bit about what it looks like out there for a brand, say a young brand, starting out and looking to promote sustainability and promote it, but actually make sustainable products, if that's a thing we can do?
Well, I think the industry is so complex that regulations are very often very far behind. So what we are innovating has no regulations because it's innovative. Hence, there is a big gray zone of what you can do. And I think young people, when you have hopes and dreams and you want to have a certain career ahead of you and you have plans of how you want to achieve this, regulations can feel very limiting in that sense. And I think what I see more and more with our students is that they consider sustainability a challenge, as something to creatively conquer, as something that if they really use their creative skills to the full extent, they will find a solution, a kind of merger that they can work with. But at the same time, I also have to be wary. If you want to be certified, if you want to follow certain regulations, if you want to have certain labels on your clothing or on your products, this is not only very complex, it's also very expensive. It is very challenging on the infrastructure of the company. My company is GOTS certified, and I know firsthand how complex of a supply chain this delivers, also how expensive it is, and how many challenges you face. And for a young startup, especially if they're coming from a creative point of view and not so much from a business side, entering the market, which is what we deal with most, they don't really have a strong background in business. They have a very strong background in creativity. It is enormously complex for them to navigate. So what I see a lot, and which I think is very, very hopeful, is that they opt for small, local, craft, unique, one of a kind. And I think as a sustainable approach, this is fantastic because it absolutely caters to what they also need and what they're looking for. They're looking for pieces that are representative of who they are, that they can relate to one-on-one, and that they feel that expresses or complements who they are. So I think the industry at large has a lot of problems it's tackling, has a lot of certification that will hopefully soon come into play. But for young generation, for these young creatives, I'm not talking consumers, I'm really talking the people who want to make things, it is still very far from what they are doing. And it's a jungle out there to navigate this. So I think there is a lot of progress to be made in making this more accessible or understandable. At the same time, I see greenwashing everywhere we go, constantly. And I think young people see that everywhere and they recognize it so fast, so easily. Even without the knowledge of how a certain label works. Every company, as you said, today is sustainable. And very often it means little to nothing. And I think it's the easiest way to lose your consumers. It's the easiest way to really open your business up for huge challenges and huge problems, because everybody has an iPhone, everybody has access to the internet, and everybody can criticize you or call you out on whatever BS you're selling. And they are doing this non-stop. They're actively asking for truth and honesty and reality. They're not asking for the dream, they're asking for the facts and what it really means. So yeah, I think that's what I see happening more and more. But you approach them much more from a theoretical point of view. Do you see that that our current generation students finds a good balance between creativity and sustainability? Are they starting to intellectually or theoretically merge this?
Yes, I think they are attacking the issue, but the one thing I would say is that I guess to think sustainability in ecological terms only is what they are struggling with. At times, I guess they come to design because they are with other values such as inclusivity or issues that have to do with identity, gender, race, etc. So the way they approach sustainability, I would say they do it, or they want to do it in a comprehensive manner. And a lot of the brands out there tend to focus on the environmental aspect of sustainability. And I guess, I mean, that's something brands have experienced, even brands that work really well, like Jacques Mus posting pictures of his team and getting called out for his team being mostly white. So it's the way they tackle sustainability, I guess they do it in a very they try to do it in a very comprehensive way, and the environmental aspect is perhaps in a way, on a sort of technical level, the most difficult to achieve. But I guess they see it as a more, totalizing, I guess, element. And then with creativity, I think creativity is central, both to our students as designers, but I guess to consumers of that generation. And they are definitely looking, as you said, for the special pieces. And they are invested, I think, or at least the students we work with in fashion's history. And I guess a lot of the knowledge is out there, so they are very knowledgeable about fashion's history. I think if you take a show like Euphoria and you look at the styling, Zendaya is wearing, I think in the last season, a piece by Gaultier from his famed 94-95 collection. Hunter Schafer is wearing a Claire Barrow hoodie. I don't know who knows who Claire Barrow is, but these very, very niche designers. So I think they're very invested in finding pieces that are meaningful because they are young designers or sort of producing on a sort of niche scale or talking to a niche public, but also in fashion's history. And I guess they are creative in the way they shop, mixing new with vintage items. And I guess designers, increasingly, I think sometimes when they come back from internships, they realize that the creativity you experience at school is very different from the creativity you experience in a design studio, especially in big design studios. And the tutors that work at Head have also experienced a huge change in the industry on that side of things. I guess before the golden age of fashion, you could say, the late 90s, early noughties, designers were kings. And you look at the titles of biographies of that era, we talk about kings and gods. And designers are not longer kings and gods in the design studio. So design is driven by data, by the marketing teams. So kind of this changes their approach to fashion. And a lot of them, I guess you could say that 10 or 15 years ago, the goal was to maybe work for Dior or Louis Vuitton. And this has changed also because they know they can communicate directly with a potential community and sell their stuff on social media. Some of our students design for brands, anticipate design, and then contact brands on social media and sell their designs through social media. So I guess this has changed, and although being an independent or freelance designer is very difficult, I mean, making a living being an independent designer or freelance designer is just really tricky, and researchers have actually started looking at this aspect of the labor market, creative labor specifically. So it's still very tricky out there, but there's a lot of interest in building your own brand, finding a way of sort of an alternative, I guess, to the big brands out there. So that's it's a way also of hanging on to creativity to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is very interesting, I mean, I am clearly not part of this generation, my son is, and when I watch him, I'm always surprised by how fluently he switches between the real and the virtual, and how easy this is and how united this is in a way. And simultaneously, I also noticed that he absolutely has no idea how to be bored anymore. I was thinking about this a lot because when I was growing up, we didn't have all these things. So to be bored and to be curious was something that was natural, and it happened all the time. And for him, when he is somewhere, I mean, watch around at the train station, anybody who is waiting for longer than 5 seconds pulls out its phone and starts browsing or searching or reading or doing something. We're constantly being entertained. We're constantly busy with something. And I think that if you want to make sure that you grab attention, then you have to sell something which is coherent, which has a storytelling behind it, where the sustainability is part of the DNA of what you're trying to sell, and it's not something separate or an added sauce layer over it. And I think it is really this one-on-one interaction that we see our students having with brands. They're looking for that on a almost constant level. They're looking to directly communicate to whoever they want to. They will throw you a DM for about almost anything. They will try to find ways of directly interacting to get the authenticity online, as much as you can have it in person, having a one-on-one conversation. Just as much as that, even though we are a teacher, they will approach us on any given moment at any given time. They reach out in the middle of the night. You get text messages. If you leave your phone number anywhere, they will reach out because they need one-on-one interaction, and they're looking for direct communication. And they do the same online. So if you're not available and if you don't communicate on this really direct level, you lose them instantly. I also have the feeling that when I am not if I don't engage in this level with my students, I cannot reach them anymore. So I cannot communicate anything, and we cannot brainstorm or navigate the process that they're in. So I think it's a very fast, high-paced interaction, but at the same time it's also very gratifying because it allows me, for instance, as an outsider of their process, to intervene directly. And so there's no delay. I don't have to wait for a week while they're doing something and then be confronted with whatever ends up. If they need you, they will reach out and they will immediately get this communication going again. And I think it's very interesting, and also from a brand perspective, this is how they are used to communicate and engage.
And it's pretty tricky for brand, and if you look at as brand social media out there, even heritage brands, it feels like they haven't quite harnessed social media's language. A lot of it is old school fashion photography, old school campaign, and like a selfie works that much better. And you could see that maybe Balenciaga is a good example. At least at the beginning when they started out, they really understood that, okay, the language had also changed, so you couldn't present fashion in the same way. So this issue of language also, like the platforms have a particular format, so that kind of puts new constraints on the type of content you can produce. I feel there's still a lot of soul searching when it comes to how do you talk to that generation, and what does authentic content mean. And obviously they're looking to influencers and stuff, but it's so fast paced that it's tricky to keep up also with the type of influencers, who do you hire. I think maybe a brand that is trying to like switch things a little bit is, for instance, Jean-Paul Gaultier. It's interesting that the woman they've hired, Florence Tétier, to direct the brand now does not come from fashion, but comes from art direction, so image making. She's also quite young, so these brands are also looking to, okay, maybe switch things. And I guess Virgil Abloh was a good example of coming in and switching things up and speaking also to a broader community. But yeah, I think we're still, like, for many brands, like, how do you talk authentically, and what type of content do you put out is like a huge challenge. Do you think a gap has formed between, say, Gen Z and the way, we were talking about this a little earlier, and the way corporate brands and maybe even events such as these talk about sustainability?
Mm-hmm. In a way, yes. I think when I interact with my students, luxury for them doesn't mean what luxury means for us, and I don't think they would identify a luxury house as a luxury house. I think they have very different demands for the future. They have very different ideas of what luxury actually entails for them. And I also think that these kind of I mean, not to be rude, but these kind of things, the talking and these kind of conferences, they don't actually attend. It's very hard. We even organize them in school, and even as part of the curriculum to get them there and engage is virtually impossible. And how they define sustainability, they think it's stupid that we still are talking about this. They don't understand why it's still such a topic and why we have not, everybody, all of us, embraced it and implemented it. And it's really a mystery to them why we are talking and talking and talking and not doing enough. When I got a student who came back from an internship in Paris where they made a big announcement that their aim is that by 2027 they will have equal pay in their Parisian part of the company. That is absolutely ludicrous to all of them. If you want to pay male and female portion of your company equal, why do we have to wait till 2027? What's going to happen between now and then? This is a mystery to them. They don't understand. They live in a high-paced society where they adapt their ideas on the go, and they don't understand why we are slacking behind and constantly discussing how we should do it instead of just throwing ourselves in there and actually doing it. They also don't understand why we need to communicate all the time about how sustainable we are. They expect us to be sustainable. So I think in that sense, there's a huge disconnect between their expectations, their desires, and how they see the future, and how they realize that we're still kind of fumbling around, to say it rather crude.
It's kind of surprising that brands still use old arguments. I won't mention the brand, but we were in Paris with students, huge brand, and the argument on the part of designers were like, we're making luxury products, so we are necessarily sustainable, or there's a natural link between like high luxury and sustainability. And it was kind of baffling to me that, you know, they thought this argument was going to work with students, and obviously that argument didn't work. Yeah, I would definitely agree that there's a...
They really don't understand. We're talking about it all the time. We're having huge conferences. Big houses are talking about how they're evolving. And it's just not going fast enough. Everybody's talking about the climate crisis. Everybody's talking about our need to change. And then at the same time, you get this counter message where, yeah, it's going to take another 10 years for us to transition. And it's not just because we don't know how to do it. It's also because, I mean, I understand from the one hand, changing your business is a slow process. But if you then look at houses and you realize that you have a design department and a sustainability department, which is even in a different building doing something else, then you understand that this will never work. You cannot design an object and then give it for production to somebody to make it sustainable. That's not how the game works. You need to design it sustainable from the beginning. And we are training our students and challenging them all the time to design with sustainability in mind, and whether that is working with zero waste, or whether that is working in modularity, or whether that is inventing new materials that are more sustainable. It doesn't really matter. It needs to, in the end, be a good object and a good design, regardless of the challenges you set yourself. And so they don't understand that they don't see the same commitment in the industry. And so I think if you want to capture them, if you want to catch them, that's your first challenge. Not just explaining to them why we're so slow, but to speed this process up. So, yeah.
Do you reckon that resale is an ally of sustainable design? Where does resale sit in the re-luxury in the world of like sustainability?
I think it's super interesting because we have a lot of discussions when they first start into I teach in the head, for example, I teach in the third year. So they have had different moments throughout the first and the second year that they were confronted with the question of sustainability, where the easiest and the first step in is buying secondhand, going into resale, or working with dead stock. And they know this is the first step and the easiest one to achieve it. So yes, they will applaud it. Yes, they understand it's a step in the good direction. At the same time, they think absolutely dead stock should be something that does not exist anymore in 10 years. And it is a patch, which is good for now, but it's not good enough. So that's the feedback I get. Resale is great. They all buy it. They love doing this, whether it is luxury goods or really just any secondhand store. They don't even differentiate. If it's an object they desire, they will put money aside for it and they will go for it. But at the same time, they're very aware that this is a temporary state to get rid of whatever it is we created. Where I say we because I'm part of that generation that created this. But this is not a long-term solution. So I think yes, they see it as a mini step in the right direction, expecting so much more immediately after. So I think for products that are made to last, this is vital because it's one of the easiest ways to have a long-term impact by making sure that you can keep it into circulation for a really long time. At the same time, it doesn't work for all products. And it doesn't work in the same way, or it doesn't have the same impact for all products. But yes, that's the feedback I see, and that's what I see happening. I have the feeling that students like to see more direct action.
That's a pretty good conclusion. We're coming to an end. Any questions or remarks? Or
I think they're coming with a mic for you.
We're talking a lot about like your students, but is there like maybe a Swiss concept for educators to like bring these topics like in let's say that Basel and Lausanne, École and Genève like pull on the same string, or like Paris, the fashion school in Milano, like that all the teachers have the same kind of like guideline or vision, or are you more independent and someone is going like into this subject more and pushing in this direction? Like, do you have some like resources where you get as a teacher like your guideline or like some ideas how you could like push into the right direction and like connect to the right foundations and institutions? So is there something like that? Or
I think, for instance, last year we had a conference with the school in Basel and with the school in Venice, and we tried to set up a sustainability conference for the different students of the different schools. But I think what is easily overlooked is that we, as schools, have teacher teams that are all part of the older generation, where not everybody is on the same spot about what sustainability means and how this can move forward. And it's also not everybody's specialty. I see a lot of transition happening, and we're not there yet at all. As the brands are not, so are parts of the schools not. We do a lot of education, and there are platforms out there where you can get information. There is exchange, but at the same time, which is, I think, very promising, is that, for instance, the Swiss government is taking action into making it mandatory part of curricula, which means there will be plans of how this should be implemented, and not just at our level, but way earlier. And so I think what we will be facing is new generations, the alpha generation coming up, who know way more about sustainability than most of their teachers or parents will do. So this is in the making. Is it there yet? No, not entirely. There is a reason that I teach both in Geneva and in Paris, because there are not so many of us.
Yeah, and also I would add the contexts are pretty different. So, for example, for an Italian school, they'll work directly with manufacturing and firms because a lot of stuff is produced in Italy. Our context is a little different, right? We don't necessarily have a fashion industry, so we're educating designers that are potentially going to go to Paris. And then the UK fashion schools, I guess, are focused either on creativity or business. And I guess to a certain extent, schools work like brands. And this in the past, I guess, was an obstacle to collaborations. And this, I guess, is changing now because fashion education is also taking responsibility for this, but this is very, very, very recent.
Also connected to that, unlike other fields of art like architecture, there's not a huge history of fashion design theory, and also not about sustainable fashion design theory. So there is very little written. There's a lot orientated at consumers. There's very little orientated at designers from that point of view. So that makes it harder.
And I guess in this Swiss context, we use that term a lot, design. This is, Swiss design. This is our like key value. And I guess whether that's part of the solution or not, I don't know. But I guess it's a real challenge for schools to find a balance between creativity, helping designers find their voice, because ultimately that's what's going to matter, and dealing with all the production issues and the manufacturing and the business side. Also, it's a very time-consuming, learning about fashion is design especially, is so time-consuming that there's also just logistical problems. How do we add like a course here or there? So there are like small things that we still need to deal with.
Thank you very much for this great conversation. We are running out of time, so I need to,
Sure.
end it. But thanks a lot for, all the great insights you bring to highlight, the specificities and a way to better understand this generation. Thank you very much for coming and joining us today. Thanks a lot.